Well, hello fans. Whether you're a fan of the channel or a fan of the F100, welcome. I think this is going to be the last video, and recording this video, we are getting ready to go to Tucson Jets, and I believe this video, video number 9 in the series, is coming out the day that we will be at Tucson Jets, or on our way to Tucson Jets. So Maiden is coming very soon at Tucson Jets, looking forward to it. But without further ado, let's dive back into this difficult museum piece that has been quite a journey. All right, last video we were dealing with a bunch of gremlins in the gear system, ended up putting new cylinders in, found some new cylinders, got all that dealt with. So everything is working very well now with the gear. Last video we just finished, didn't show it on the video, but we cycled the gear and it's holding air pressure in the up position and the down position, which is perfect. Now we have set up our system here. So our canopy open close, canopy lock, air brake and wheel brake is all supplied with air from the gear down leg. So if there is a leak, it's not the end of the world because the gear is going to be in the down position. So that isn't a kind of a critical thing, but what that means right now is we may have a bunch of other gremlins that pop up with all of these other items. Now these old Jetronic valves, they're great quality valves. I'm hoping that everything works well with them. But what we need to do now is we need to kind of cue things up to get the canopy lock and the canopy open close system working. Now our duct is here and our air cylinder mounts right there on the duct. Now this air cylinder pushes the canopy up and down, opens and closes it. So that air cylinder is sitting right in this location right here. So what I'll probably end up doing is we're going to get some lines run, the air cylinder installed so we can put it on the duct when needed. But that air cylinder ultimately will just be able to come on and off the duct. So that's easy. Now, as far as canopy lock goes, we've got the whole canopy system here, and the lock is supplied with air on those two Robart fittings right there. So we can do the same thing. Don't even need to get this installed, but we can get lines run so we can plug them in to the canopy lock system. So ultimately the point of getting all this stuff set up and plugged into the valves is we can test it out and make sure everything's working well. Our air brake, that's already run to the air brake system, so there's nothing really to do with that. Wheel brakes, obviously that's run to the gear system, nothing to do with that. So what I'm going to do with the canopy and lock system is we are going to be using some Festo line coming out of the valves. Because this has push-in fittings and they work really well with the Festo line. And then we're going to be installing the reducers or restrictors in these guys. Now, canopy open close, I want to have a restrictor on both sides. Lock, I'm just going to add one restrictor in. I want the canopy to be nice and slow, just like we've been able to accomplish with our door, nose doors and main doors here. But that's how we're going to set everything up. We've got 3 of these reducers slash restrictors. And so I'll get all that stuff plumbed and then we'll see how things are progressing. So we got very, very good news. Canopy is in place. We've got the lock hooked up. We've got the air cylinder hooked up. It's just sitting in there. The air brake is hooked up. The wheel brakes are hooked up. And it has been sitting at a constant pressure now for well over 5 minutes. And everything's working very well except our wheel brakes. I'll talk about that in a second. So air brake, there we go. Very nice. So only thing with the wheel brakes is the right-hand side, this guy right here is working. And the left side over there is not working. I think what happened is the little adapter that I built, which is the little 2 to 3 millimeter adapter to go from the BVM 2 millimeter line to the 3 millimeter line. Those are pieces of tubing soldered together, so I have a sneaking suspicion that's where the blockage is. I pulled the line off of the end of the wheel that goes into the brake itself, and no air is coming out. So that's why I suspect that is our problem. So I'm going to disassemble that little adapter and we will check and see. But I'll tell you, this makes me extremely happy that it appears we don't have to chase any more gremlins. So we pulled the wing off, laid it on the table, got our little adapter piece out, and there was a little piece of, looked like maybe glue. It might have been solder because we soldered those two pieces together just in the tube. So super easy to get out. I just took a fine drill bit and just stuck it through and everything was good. So brakes work good now. I used my compressor, added some pressure to the brake side, and you could hear and feel the brakes working. So perfect. Get this installed back on the plane. All right, wings are back on and everything is working very well. So brakes work, canopy holds air, unlocks, locks, the air cylinder opens, closes. So excited, guys. So damn excited. Amazing, awesome. Cool, so next thing is I'm gonna pull the wings back off and I think we can start working on plumbing, which is cool because we have to have the wings off to do up our fasteners for the tanks. So I'm gonna start to work into that stuff and man, excited, very excited. So good news, got tanks installed with the tanks actually bolted down. I was worried about this. We're able to get the duct in, so that is awesome. I thought we might have to leave the tanks loose, but that's great. So duct works well, our battery placements and everything look like they're going to work very well. These battery holders, once they're epoxied onto the duct like this, it makes it crazy rigid. So that's a good thing, definitely a good thing. Awesome, so I'm going to pull the duct back out and we will we'll be able to do our plumbing next. So I got to get our vent mounted on the bottom of the plane and our UAT is going to tuck in right there, super tight. So definitely got some stuff to think out here. Before I pull this duct out, I got to plan out how we're gonna run things. So we've got to have our vents come to a joiner piece. So I might use a Festo T and then have our line go down to our vent line, which is down there. So that plumbing section is definitely going to be tight. The main tanks both come to a point and then that's going to feed the UAT. So need to keep that in mind as well too. Lots to think about still, but good progress. All right, so we got our kind of initial plumbing done to our UAT sort of, but I put everything back in just to see how everything's going to be run. So this is one of those times in the plane build when you're putting it in, taking it out, put it in, taking it out, because there's so much going on in this area. So we've got our duct in, we've got the canopy cylinder just sitting here, and the rear cockpit tub is sitting where it sits, so right like that. So we actually have a fair amount of room right in this area. Now when you put the canopy in here, there's that plate that comes right across, so that kind of blocks all this off. So what I was looking at here is how are we going to run our vent lines. So we've got a vent line here, a vent line there. So I think what I'm going to do is have those lines come forward like this to a T, and then that T is going to go down to the vent fitting, which is right down there. So we kind of have to pre-run that vent line coming up. That's an important thing. And that's why I put this all back together like this, just to figure that part out. The other thing is our UAT pulling from the tanks. So obviously UAT is on this side, and we want to keep the pull rate as equal as possible. So our UAT tank side, we could have a line that is conceivably this short, but the other side of the plane needs this exact length of line to come out of the tank, come over into the UAT. So what we're doing is making both lines exactly the same, and this line here that could be very short, we're just going to come out of that tank, do a loop or two, or this way I guess, and then straight down to the UAT. So if we were just to run a short line and a long line this way, the aircraft wouldn't drain equally. So this tank would drain quicker than that tank, which isn't a good thing in this setup. And we have all of our plumbing now done. So all of our supply plumbing from our UAT is all run to the tanks and everything. Everything's run to the fuel pump. We've got our vent lines run, but just loose, of course, because we have to do all those attachings when the duct is in place. We've got our fill line here as well too. Kind of left that a little bit long, but it does obviously fit back to here, which is good. And we've got our supply line going to the turbine right there. That's of course a whole spool of lines, so we can run that wherever we need to. So fuel supply stuff, check. Next thing we need to do is work on getting the turbine centered and everything and set up with the little ears and whatnot in the bypass. So once this is set up, we can take it out, get the bypass fastened to the pipe, and then the turbine essentially just drops in. You bolt your ears up. So this is a bit of a process on these guys, but fortunately, I think our spacing and everything from what we looked at previously in the beginning part of this series, this engine is going to fit very well. So I'm going to gather our parts up and we will take a look at what we need to do. All right, so we kind of have everything kind of queued up here. I'll just show you some of the basic things. Now this is pretty standard stuff when it comes to BVM bypasses. So you have your ears, you've got your mounts on the bypass itself, and in this case we're using hose clamps. The original clamps were designed for the larger engines, so that's why we're using the hose clamps, which is totally fine. And then we've got this little tab on the bottom. So that little bottom tab, what it does is this sits against the bottom of the bypass and spaces the turbine, but allows the turbine to not drop. So sometimes with this design, you know, if they're a little bit loose and you're in transport and stuff, the engine can shift down, and that would cause obviously some issues because the engine would be sitting too low in the pipe and it wouldn't be centered. So that's what that little tab is for. So just kind of getting things lined up here. It's a bit of a process. I'd like to keep these hose clamps kind of hidden, but that becomes a bit of an issue for adjustment. So what I'll do is just move these to the top while we get this thing set up and adjusted. So now with this kind of temporarily put in place, what we can do is we can get our ears fastened to the side of the bypass, and then we will be able to loosen this off and get it adjusted. Now we will be sucking this bypass in a little bit like that. I don't think it's going to be an issue because we're not excessively in, and I've already taken this and fit it on there and everything looks good. So just to be aware of what's going on. All right, so while we are in this midsection, I got our light mounted. Now this is going to be a super powerful strobe. So that is done. We've got that C8 in place, and I just put some shoe goop on there. We also, of course, have to add our resistor into the system, so we'll leave that be for a little bit and come back to it. So next thing to do is get our bypass mounted to the pipe. Now, when we put this plane together, we need to be mindful of how it all works. So kind of have to have the bypass and pipe in here mounted together but tucked back. Then our duct slips in, and then that bypass is going to come forward, sit over top of the duct, and then gets screwed down. So this is kind of why I changed the pipe setup, because this pipe moving in and out like that makes it way easier instead of doing everything from the front here. So the only difficulty is when we put this pipe in is getting our straps done up to the side of the bypass, but with it loose, it's going to be much easier again as well. So that is the next step in our assembly here. Well guys, I got happy feelings right now. Very, very satisfied that this duct is going in, fingers crossed, for the last time. This has been quite the project. So we have our bypass attached to our pipe. That slid backwards out of the way. We've got our extension for our light that's on top of the hatch. We've got our air lines all run and out of the way. They're tucked out of the way. We've got all of our fuel lines here as well too, and everything's shoe gooped. So let's put this duct in. Super cool. Very, very satisfied so far. Now with all of our lines and everything here, it's probably going to be a little bit tight, but I think we should be able to sneak this in just like we did before. Just got to keep access to all the stuff, right? There we go. Kind of has just the right spot to tuck in there, which is great. So, okay, we've got all of our air lines, all of our fuel lines. That's good. And sneak it on in. Phenomenal. There it is. Oh my gosh, this has been a massive pain in the butt, but it's put together. So our engine's in, it's nice and centered. We've got obviously our pipe all mounted, our front ducts all mounted, and I just finished screwing the screws in for the front duct. Wow. So the next things to work on here, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to tuck our front pilot in first, clean up this glass a little bit, tuck the front pilot in first, and then we're going to kind of check and see where we can start mounting some of our antenna, because some of our antenna can mount in this front area, this guy here, so we'll tuck our antennas kind of in there and figure that part out. And then we will slowly get our cockpit put together here. I'm going to put our air cylinder on there as well too. And once I get that kind of figured out, then I will think about putting our vent lines together. I think we're good. I mean, we've you know, I've gone over everything. Everything works. Everything's plugged in like it should. We don't have to move anything around. So I think we're good. Yeah, I'm just trying to go through this methodically and make sure we're doing everything like we should be. All right, guys, big steps done here. We've got our batteries just laid in there. Now these batteries are a little bit tight. So what I did here, the best way that I found was plug the battery in, then install it on the tray or the holder so it's as, you know, snug as possible. Obviously, it would have been nice to be able to run those holders back further, but we can't because the rear bypass comes right to the edge. So. Anyways, that'll be fine. We've got our vent lines run here as well too. This actually worked out well because the cockpit sits right over top of this. So this tucks right underneath the cockpit, which is awesome. So we've got our front dash panel in, and I've got one of the receivers. You can see the little yellow tip right there, right on the dash panel. Now that one's nice because the dash panel kind of always stays in place, as does this front cockpit or guy. Because, oh well, unless you're taking the duct out, but you know, if we were getting access to any of this stuff, really all you need to do is take the rear cockpit out. But so what we're going to do is I've already got one of my 3D printed holders here. I'm just going to get the rear cockpit installed, and then I'm going to run these guys somewhere on the seat here, just so they're obviously up and out of the flight metal. So more big progress here. We've got our pilots installed. We've got our canopy installed, and canopy's all bolted down. Our airlines here, our fill valve or fill system, it's right there. So it comes like this. We're also going to add a Festo valve in here, a 6mm Festo valve, probably add it right in this area so it doesn't interfere. We'll do that in Tucson when we're ready to maiden the plane. Our airlines come up and go to the canopy lock right there. And what I did was previously all of our extensions to access all of our devices were kind of run in this area right here. So because the cockpit and everything's protected and the only way to access those would be to pull the canopy off, what I did was just run those guys right back there underneath the canopy. So when we need to use these things, they're all accessible right there. So now they're hidden out of the way, which is great. That's going to work perfectly, and we've got access to everything that we need. The air cylinder that opens the canopy is right there. The canopy itself, it's a little bit of a different system. So there's not an air cylinder that's pushing it up and down. It's just an air cylinder that's pushing up and coming down, and it's pushing against a plate. So when this comes up, it's going to be like that. When it goes down, I suspect it, I mean, it might. It's a little tight in here. I put a little bit of lube in there, but yeah, the canopy itself is just going to pop down, and then the lock is air operated both directions. So as far as our antennas go, we've got one pointing forward and backwards right there. We've got the other primary one is pointing straight up and down right there beside the pilot. And this is our first clone antenna, so that's at a 45-degree angle. And then our second clone antenna is like this. So we've got all the axes covered this direction, straight up and down, an angle, and crossways. So that should be good. Yes, they're visible, but again, on a plane like this and planes in general, functionality and flyability and reliability is number one, scaleness number two. So I mean, the little yellow tips and stuff just blend in. It's really not a big deal at all. Fill valve is right there. So that's where you're adding air initially at the beginning of the day. And we've got our batteries laid out here as well too. So the last thing I just finished up was our plug for our light. Now I would have loved to make like a lock-in system where you kind of put the hatch in, but because the front here slides in first and then the back is the latching part, and there's really not a lot of structure in this area to do anything with. You know, if this is a big flat plate, then we could have that plug in somewhere when we put that hatch in, but there's so much going on here, there's really no room to do that. So the simple solution is we have an MPX connector. I used an MPX connector because it is easy to use and easy to get in and out. And also, of course, it only goes together one way. So we've got that built into a nice mount. The wire does have a split right down there. That uses a servo connector. So if the canopy needs to come off, again, very easy to separate those things. So definitely serviceability is also very easy on this plane still. Now this is the light on the hatch, and I left the length of the cable basically full length. The reason I did that is what I was thinking of is right now this is set up so you plug it in, put the hatch on, but you could also take a little bit more cable out of the system here, and the wing could be sitting here as an example, pull the hatch off, rest it on the wing, and you have enough cable there to do whatever option you want. And I think there's actually enough cable that you might even be able to put it on the ground if you keep it long. So we've got options with that. Next thing to do is, I think before we put the, I got to put the wings on so we can check the air system up here. So I guess the next thing to do is put the wings on, and we're very close to running this thing tonight, which is very exciting. So a little bit of work to do on the canopy open close thing, but we've got some wicked lights going on here. So the camera doesn't pick it up properly, but the top strobe is mental. Of course, we've got our tip lights as well too. And then on the underside, we've got our landing lights, center red strobe, and that guy right there. Super cool. So she is assembled. She's on the ground. And pretty sure it's time to get some fuel inside and run this thing. So it's pretty late tonight, so I probably will run it in the morning, but I'm going to fill up the fuel system. We'll check volume, and then what we're probably going to do is take apart the canopy here, and that will allow us to be able to deal with the cylinder that opens and closes the canopy. I think it came off, or the wood broke or something. So anyways, we'll deal with that, but let's fill this thing up first and see how much fuel it actually holds. Definitely a little bit scary on this one because can't see anything down there, so, but we will obviously be able to see the fuel coming up the tanks. And I can hear the fuel now sloshing around, so that's good. All right, so we're at 3.8 liters. I believe this tank setup is supposed to hold 4.8 liters, and it looks like we are filling quite evenly, which is awesome. We're almost at the top here, so. Do have the taxi tank hooked up as well. Yeah, almost exactly the same. So perfect. So I just caught it as the fuel was coming out the vent. Tanks are both equal right now. So we're at 4.6 liters of fuel. So that's what we're going to program the turbine system to, is we'll put 4.6 in there as fuel capacity. So I'm going to take about a liter out of the system, and we're going to leave it sit overnight, and then tomorrow we'll check and make sure that everything is hunky-dory. All right, so basically the entire mount here that this was mounted to before, that all came off. So I mixed up some high sol, got that glued back in place, and we will leave it be until tomorrow, and that should be all good. So this is a pretty simple Canopy open-close system. It's going to work fairly well. The one thing with this plane, obviously, is you have very little room for anything. So to change that Canopy system to a more traditional system where the cylinder's like this and it's pushing up and down would be very difficult because that duct is in the way. So this air cylinder system is going to work fine. What's going to happen is, you know, before you taxi out, you're going to before you leave the pits, you're going to manually, well, you're going to make sure it closes and locks, and you're confirm that it locks. And then when you come in for a landing and you know, you've successfully landed and you're taxiing back, that's when you can open up the canopy, and there's going to be, you know, it's going to open fine and be zero issues. But you always with canopy stuff, you really want to make sure that it's locked visibly with your own eyes before you go to take off. So totally fine. It's going to work great. Yeah, we're really close to wrapping this project up, guys. It's very, very rewarding. Looking forward to filling this thing up tomorrow and running this engine and having this plane be ready to fly for the first time in like 15 to 18 years. Well, we're getting ready for the test run. Fuel's in the tanks. We're just charging batteries right now, and came down this morning, came into the shop, and just having this thing sitting here in the middle of the floor. What a beautiful aircraft. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of projects that, you know, pretty much every project we complete here, I always have a very happy, prideful feeling when I'm completed. And this one definitely is up there in the list. And super, super cool plane. Our actuator cylinder for the canopy, that's all good. Just put everything back together. And yeah, we're ready to test run this thing. So I put 3 liters of fuel in the aircraft and get batteries plugged in and start this thing up. All right, so we've got the rear part of the plane up on blocks of wood because the F100 naturally sits with the tail down so much. So that is that's the reason for those blocks of wood. And we've got our GSU hooked up, but we've got the turbine dashboard on the radio hooked up. So I didn't have a visual on the fuel line while I was priming the engine. So I don't know if we've got fuel all the way to the engine or not. And as we go through this, guys, I will put up on the screen exactly what I'm doing. This test run is going to be pretty straightforward. The main thing I'm going to focus on here, once we're happy and everything's running, is I'm going to put the hatch on, and we're going to check temperatures around that back end and make sure everything is all good.
Turbine armed. Burner on.